Welcome to the Proof Point Podcast, where we decode digital success one click at a time. We share key takeaways fueled by data and insights that your team can implement today to drive growth. Now, let's get started.
This is Stacy Porter-Bilger, your host for the Proof Point Podcast, where I feature B2B and D2C businesses and thought leaders sharing marketing, data tactics, sales strategies, and leadership insights that will kickstart your growth in this rapidly changing digital space. This episode is brought to you by Proof Digital. Proof Digital is a strategic and creative performance marketing agency. We partner with companies to create data-fueled marketing sales funnels and overall growth strategies. Visit proofdigital.com to learn more. Before I get started, I want to do a shout out to a previous guest of ours who someone introduced me to our guest, but our guest actually kind of found us based on our topic, is my understanding. So shout out to Chief Jason Kuzik, who actually recently retired from the Coast Guard. He was on a previous episode, and the title was Intrusive Leadership. This is where the magic happens. And I took that quote from him in the conversation, which led to us connecting to our guest, Marcus Canady. Thank you, Marcus, for coming. I'm going to give a quick introduction here. Marcus is the CEO of the Canady Leadership Group, which is squarely focused on improving the leaders' abilities of people in the public and private sectors, feeding off of personal experiences, military experience. Marcus has become a leading voice on intrusive leadership and has traveled the country to spread the message on this critical leadership style. He's a 24-year veteran of the Coast Guard, author of Intrusive Leadership, which we're going to talk about today. You are a helicopter pilot, and you served our country, a thought leader, and simply a change agent. Marcus, thank you so much for jumping on today. I can't appreciate it enough. I know you're a busy guy, and you're giving us our time to learn a few things about how we can change the way we lead.
Yes, thank you for having me. Thank you so very much.
To get started, I mean, I just like to know people's story. So can you just talk a little bit about your journey?
Yes. So my journey to the point where I am today, being someone that is truly passionate about leadership and being the lead voice on intrusive leadership. It goes really far back, but I'll kind of start in the middle, and I'll explain why
I'm excited.
I'm starting in the middle. So there was a time where I found myself simply in a mental space at work that I was just simply not okay.
Yeah.
I was walking around acting like everything was okay, but things were happening in my personal life that were really causing me some stress and some mental challenges. And so I found it tough to compartmentalize my thoughts, my focus at this time, even when I was in the workplace. And at the time, I was a helicopter pilot. I was a commanding officer in the Coast Guard.
Yeah.
I've been trained and tried to train others about the importance of compartmentalizing whatever's going on in your personal life so you can focus on the job. And I found myself at a point where I was struggling to do that. What was going on? I had just recently watched the murder of George Floyd.
Yeah.
I had, thinking about Breonna Taylor, thinking about Ahmaud Arbery. I was living in Houston, Texas. Every time driving into work, I drive right by where George Floyd was buried. If you remember back to 2020, there was just a lot of racial tension going on in the country, right? And so I found myself at a point where I was not okay. And then I looked around and nobody was reaching out to me. Nobody was saying, hey, how are you doing with everything that's just going on in the world right now? um,
Yeah.
friends, coworkers. I mean, I was having conversations with people because I was still working, but no one was really looking at me as a whole person, recognizing that because of what was going on in the country at the time, that conversations that I was having at my kitchen table with my
Right.
wife, thinking about my kids, also thinking about a father of a African American son,
Yeah.
no one was really thinking about me in that sense. They were talking about me as the employee, as the Coast Guard pilot. I ended up writing an article that basically the gist of the article was to say that the Coast Guard at the time, and really just people, did not need to miss the moment of being intrusive and making sure people felt like they were valued and supported in a holistic sense, right?
Yeah.
The feedback that I got from the article was just through the roof, right? It was tremendous. It was literally more than what I was anticipating.
It was, you were saying things people were thinking,
100%.
right?
And so the article was shared all throughout the Coast Guard. People reached out to me. People started asking me to speak about my feelings. People were that I did not know were calling me, telling me that, hey, you spoke exactly what was on my heart, as you just mentioned.
Right.
I remember one member of the Coast Guard at the time, she said that for the first time, she felt like she could take a deep breath since watching that video.
Yeah.
So the reason why I say that this journey, I started in the middle, is because at that point, I really started to think about my favorite leaders, my favorite supervisors, people that have become that leader for me, right?
Right.
The leader that I truly trusted, the leader that I worked for 10, 15 years ago that I'm still in contact with today, right? When I started to think about those leaders, I had to go back to early in my career. So I was fortunate enough to be positively impacted by leaders that truly took the time to make intentional actions to gain my trust and to make sure that I knew that they cared about Marcus,
Right.
not just the Coast Guard officer, not just the pilot, that they cared about me as a person. They were willing to talk to me about sensitive subjects that I might have been dealing with, once again, outside the workplace.
Right.
Way that they cared for me, the way that they held me accountable when I needed to be held accountable, right?
Right.
So when I thought about those leaders and how they impacted me, when I thought about how I was feeling in that moment after watching the George Floyd murder, and once again, not just that, the Breonna Taylor situation, the
Yeah.
Ahmaud Arbery, the Christian Cooper situation in Central Park, all of these things,
Yeah.
and not having someone around that looked at me different and was willing to engage with me to make sure that I was okay, that just started me on a journey of communicating the importance of it, researching it more, and then which ended up leading me to writing the book, and going across the country talking about it.
Well, thank you, one, for sharing that. And it's just so vital for where we are right now in the world right now to really to have these conversations, to understand what our neighbors are going through, what our employees are going through. I mean, when I mean, obviously when COVID happened, went through it, and all these different things are happening. I mean, the mental stress on all my employees was so high, and mine too. I mean, my stress was okay. I got to make sure that we make payroll, and people who aren't paying us pay us, and so that everybody's okay. But I mean, they're dealing with all these things in which you're dealing with. They're dealing with sick family members. They're dealing with mental health.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about mental health a little bit, because I know that that's kind of what kicked off our introduction. That story when I was talking to Jason, um, and this is really how we found each other. I mean, how you reached out to Jason and said, "Hey, I'll talk to Stacy about this because I liked how we talked, how you were talking about this." So you want to hit on that story a little bit and how that really, I mean, it's such an issue right now, and we have to be aware and talk to our employees and our neighbors and our family members. So go ahead.
Definitely. I will tell you that very early on, as I was doing research on intrusive leadership, I kept hearing story after story about how this leadership style has played a role in leaders being able to help someone at a time that they were thinking about taking their own life.
Yeah.
And so I very early on, I knew the impact of this leadership style on suicide. But I will tell you that every story, it hits me as if I'm hearing it for the first time. So every presentation I do on intrusive leadership, when I'm talking about the impacts, the last one that I talk about is suicide. Because as you mentioned, for some reason, it is just becoming more and more of an issue in our country, in this world. It's hitting
Young
all
people.
sectors, right? Young people, the retiree community in the military, dealing with it a lot. And
Sure.
active duty. I will tell you, it's just all over. In my organization, I can't go a month without hearing about someone that either committed suicide or having suicidal ideation, right? So, how did I end up hearing about the story of Chief Cusick? I was doing a presentation in New Orleans, and someone, towards the end of the presentation, one of the junior members in the room, he said, "Hey, I know for a fact that this leadership style that you are talking about saved a couple of lives at my previous unit." And he just kind of told everyone in the room, like, "Hey, this is serious stuff. What this person in the front of the room is talking about is he is speaking the truth." So I ended up connecting with him later on because I just had to hear this story.
Right.
And it ended up leading me to reaching out to Chief Kuzik and hearing his story. And it was just profound. I would tell you, it is the best story that highlights how this leadership style can simply play a part in addressing mental health. Now, I always say play a part. I never want to act like this is
Right.
the answer. I
Right.
don't want to act like there's no need for chaplains or mental health professionals if you have intrusive leadership. Not at all.
Right.
This is a tool that leaders have that can put them in a position where they can recognize who might need the mental health professional, who might need to go and call the hotline, right?
Right.
So Chief Cusick, he's an intrusive leader. And it was very interesting because over the past couple of weeks, I was able to reach out to one of his previous supervisors
Okay.
that basically, led him in this manner. And so this individual, Steve Cabral, I'm not sure, I believe he mentioned him
He might have.
when he talked to you.
Yeah.
The way that he led Chief Cusick and the impact that it had on Chief Cusick. Chief Cusick wanted to have that same impact on each other,
Yeah.
on everyone else, right?
Yep. It kind of trickled down.
Exactly. So he led that way. He was made sure that he reached out, that he was caring, that he knew that he was very intentional in making sure the people that was working for him knew that he truly cared about them, right? And because he did that, there was a couple of situations where he was in position to play a role in someone still being here today as they were dealing with things, right? Well, fast forward, Chief Cusick ended up getting some bad news about a medical diagnosis.
Right.
And he decided that he was going to take his life because he didn't want to be a burden on other people.
Right.
But he was taking some time getting some things in order, right? Paperwork, whatnot, wanted to make sure the family was safe. And obviously, he thought he was masking, his emotions, that he was still acting the same. Well, his crew, people that was working with him, junior folks, because he was the senior person at
There's no hierarchy to this leadership style.
Yeah, he was the senior person, right? They recognized that something was off with him.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't getting the normal, happy, engaging Chief Cusick, but they cared about him because he cared about them.
Yes.
So when they recognized the change in him, they went to him. They went into his office and said, "We're not leaving until you tell us what is going on with you, because we want the old Chief Cusick back. That's who we." And he finally ended up telling them what was going on. And they asked him, "Are you thinking about taking your life?" And he said he was. And they end up, telling him how much they meant to him and got him to change his mind, change his plan. Thankfully, what it's still amazing to me, because later on he found out that bad news that he received was a misdiagnosis.
I know.
And just think about what would have happened if his folks, people that were junior to him, didn't come into his office, just ignored it. If they weren't intrusive, he might have carried out his plan before ever realizing that he was misdiagnosed. And so, dealing with one person, the story highlights multiple situations where, even at the workplace, people simply treating people the way that they should be treated, caring about them, recognizing that they're a person, they're not just an employee, making sure that everyone feels valued.
Yep.
The job. There are people here today simply because of that.
I mean, you hit a little bit more. Is it? I mean, it's the style, right? Because we've both been trained on emotional intelligence. We've been trained on servant leadership. We've been trained on other leadership styles. I've been through lots of different, and they all have pieces, right? They all have pieces that are important. But this style to me is a little bit different because it kind of pulls in all of them a little bit.
100%. I was doing an event, and we were talking with a bunch of athletic directors at college, NC2A athletic directors, and they were just talking about leadership. Because at the end of the day, leadership touches every career field, right?
It does.
Leadership is important.
And every level of an organization. I want my employees to lead at what they're doing.
Right.
So it doesn't matter what level.
All the way to the top. I mean, if we say all the time, leadership is an action. It's not a position, right?
It's an action. I love that. It's an action.
Yep. So what I ended up talking to this individual about is to say, hey, if you want to tell someone to have emotional intelligence, you want to tell someone to create an emotionally safe environment, we tell someone to be willing to have difficult conversations, to be able to connect with them on a personal level, to be able to make them feel valued, right? To treat them as a whole person, to be able to hold them accountable, right? To increase their employee satisfaction, right? to create an environment that is truly inclusive. I said, if you want a leader to do all those things, how do you tell them to act? What is the leadership style? And that person couldn't, he couldn't name it. And I said, it's intrusive leadership. I will tell people, and I will be honest, that you can hear elements of intrusive leadership in a number of different places. But I do think that what's different is that this puts all of those things in a bucket and shows you how to do it in the actions that create those different things, right? And I will say that what is really different, which I think is why I'm intentional in using the word, because it really highlights. You can do a lot of these other leadership styles that people think gets at this: servant leadership, charismatic leadership, engaging leadership, all of these things, and only truly deal with the employee. So when you look at servant leadership, you can have someone that says, hey, I'm gonna make sure that you have all the training that you need.
Right.
I'm gonna make sure that you have all the resources. I'm gonna make sure that you have all your safety equipment. You know, as your leader, I am going to serve you to make sure that you have all that you need to be successful.
Right.
And never ask you about how you're doing outside the workplace. Never try to get to know you beyond the job.
And assume that's not going to impact your ability to work. I mean, I have employees in various stages, whether they're dealing with a sick parent or, or childcare issues, you name it. From my assumption of those things are not going to impact their day is ludicrous. So I need to have those conversations and be supportive and work through those issues. And each employee is different. So there's
truly each employee is different. And I'll touch on a couple of things. In a lot of our professions, military professions, police officers, firefighters, right? Let's take police officers. They put their life on the line every single time they put on that uniform and they walk the streets.
Yep.
To make things safe for us. They put 100% of themselves on the line.
Yep.
So they consider 15% of them to be an employee. That other 85% being a wife, being a mother, father, son, daughter, all the other things that make them up. When they put their uniform on and they are working, the part of them that is the father, we are going to ask them to sacrifice that part of them if the time comes. The part of them that is a wife, we're going to ask them to put that part of themselves on the line to keep American citizens safe.
Right.
So we're going to ask the police officer to put 100% of themselves on the line every day. And yet we have people that only want to lead the 15%.
I know.
And not the whole person. You can't do that.
No.
If you really want to have the most impact as a leader, you have to be willing to lead the whole person.
Yeah. And it's not a one-time thing. It's not a week thing. It's an ongoing learning process.
100%. It is a daily interaction. What I like to say is that it is the foundation of how you lead. It should be how you interact with your people every single day. Now, when I say that, I don't mean that every single day you ask them, hey, how are things at home?
Right.
I'm not saying,
right.
I'm not saying that.
Right.
But your folks that work for you should know that what is going on with them holistically matters.
It
And
does.
if they are having issues outside the workplace, that they are working in an emotionally safe environment with people that care about them holistically, that they can tell their supervisor, they
Right.
can tell their coworkers, hey, you guys, I'm dealing with this situation at home.
Right.
Me and my wife just had a horrible fight.
Yeah.
I don't even know if she's going to be home when I get home. And my mind is not here. We have to have people that work in places that they can communicate that and get the care that they need, not be judged, right?
Right.
Say that those things don't matter, you know, get the job done.
Right.
And when you do that, that person is going to do so much more. Like you gain so much more. Now, earlier you mentioned something about everyone is different.
It is. Yeah.
Everyone is different. And this is kind of, you know, a little bit of a DE and I thing. Everyone is different. Even when you look at people within the same ethnic group.
Yeah.
I'm African American. The next person that's African American is different than me.
Yes.
Right? Not every woman.
We like to put people in buckets, but they're not. We're all different. We're all dealing with different things at different times.
Right. All women don't think the certain way.
Nope.
All white males don't think the certain way. Or whatever group you want to think you put people in, they all have different life experiences. They all come from a certain place. So think about this. If everyone was working for someone that they felt was truly intentional about building an authentic, trusting relationship with them and truly valued them as a whole person and was willing to support them through anything that they had going on, how could that not be a truly inclusive environment?
In an environment, not that this is why I do it, but it's a way for people to want to stay somewhere and be involved in a business, because I mean, if they feel heard and safe, and they feel like, you know, again, it's an emotionally supportive environment, they're not going to get that everywhere.
Right.
And so I'm a small business. At minimum, that's what I can do for them.
Right.
But I care. I do it because that's who I am. But it's part of my. It can't be fake. It's got to be. It's got to be totally real, because I truly do care. But it is our culture. So you have to build that, and that takes time and work.
It does take time. But if you think about it, that is actually what inclusion is about. It is how everyone feels. You can have diversity because you just have different people working in the workspace, right?
Yeah.
So you have diversity, right? But you might not have inclusion if everyone doesn't feel like they matter. And that's what this leadership style does. It doesn't matter who you are.
Right.
You feel valued, right? Mm-hmm. When I talk about the impacts of this on retention and the importance of retaining quality talent, I make an emphasis that organizations need to retain all quality talent.
Yep.
Not just quality talent that are from women, not just quality talent from minorities. We need to retain all quality talent. So this leadership style is not something that you do for specific groups of people. It is what you do for everyone. Because once again, if everyone is working for this type of leader that they really feel like cares about them, that is the inclusive environment that we're trying, that corporations spend millions of dollars trying to create. And I think one of the reasons, in my humble opinion, that we become stagnant in our efforts is because when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we tell people what not to do. Don't say this.
That's
Don't do
true.
that.
It's true. It's
Don't
so
post
true.
this. Don't
All diversity training is about the not.
the not. We don't tell people what to do.
That's
We
right.
don't
And then it
tell
gets hard. It's sticky, and then they don't know how to, and then it's not solved. So go ahead.
well, if all you've done is tell people what not to do,
Right.
then if they don't do those things, then they feel like, hey, I've done what you told me to do. I didn't do these things.
Right.
But you also didn't go and engage. You didn't go and ask that person that you know is of Jewish descent
Why?
how they're doing right now with everything that's
Right.
going on with Israel and Hamas.
Right. All
You
right.
didn't ask the person that is Muslim how they're doing right now with all this that's going on. During the pandemic, when the Asian hate, did you engage those individuals?
Right.
Right? All these things that are going on. When you catch wind that there's some people that are pushing back against DE&I, right? Because there's a group of the workforce, of citizens that are pushing back against DE&I because they don't think that they're included in the conversation. So do we go to our white male counterparts and make sure that they understand that they're included in the conversation as well? We have a lot of times, once again, when we talk about DE&I, we talk about the don'ts.
Yeah.
We talk
That's the,
about,
yeah.
yeah, we don't talk about the do's. And for me, one of the foundational things that as a leader you need to do is intrusive leadership.
You know, I think we have a common leader that we kind of follow a little bit, Simon Sinek. And this topic you were talking about, I watched his video a decade ago. Why, right? It's kind of similar, right? You got to start with why, right? And how great leaders inspire. And I know you talked about intrusive leadership, and I know you actually had a conversation with Simon, which is I'm actually really jealous about that, Marcus. I'm a fan. I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek, and I mean the power of why, and how leaders really do inspire. But you talked to him about how your naming of this leadership side, this style. So tell me a little bit about that conversation. And I can understand, we didn't get into our conversation about the intrusive word. So can you share a little bit about your story there with that conversation and how you landed on keeping that intrusive leadership as part of your mission and obviously your book, but also just why you think it's important to use that word?
Oh, without a doubt. So yes, as you said, amazing opportunity that I was afforded to talk to Simon Sinek for about 30 minutes. And I will always be grateful for that.
Yeah.
And I'm
Jealous.
huge fan as well. And, start with why, and you can't say it better than he does. That without a doubt, when you lead, if you can find out the why people are where they are, what motivates them. Like it truly just unlocks the superpowers of leadership, right?
It does. It does.
My
and marketing and leading, whatever you're doing.
Whatever you're doing. And my thing is that this is not anything different. To me, it's part of it. Because to truly understand a person's why, you have to know the who.
You do.
Who is the person that you're working with, right? So I had this conversation. He read an article that I wrote in 2020. It was the article that I wrote during the attention, right? And so what was very interesting is he spent the majority of the conversation telling me how he didn't like the term. He really advocated and pressed for me to find a different term. He wanted me to find a term that was more comfortable, that was more positive, pleasing when you immediately heard it. Because when he first heard intrusive leadership, he was like, oh, I'm not sure what this is. And he Googled the word intrusive and looked up the synonyms. And the synonyms of the word intrusive are all negative: intruding, meddlesome, right? Invasive, micromanaging, all these terms. So he's like, he really questioned if I would ever be able to advocate for a leadership style that had positive impacts,
right,
had a negative name. But once again, even though he said that, what he also said was, there's a great reason for you to keep the term. And what he said is that when you look at the actions that I'm telling leaders to make in order to build authentic, trusting relationships with their people, he said, when you look at the actions, there isn't a better word that describes those actions than the word intrusive. So when you think about it, if you have a problem at the house, if you have a fire in your kitchen, and you call the fire department, when they show up, don't you want them to be intrusive?
Yeah, I don't want them to stay outside. That's for darn true.
Right?
That's right.
But
They gotta jump into action, man.
yeah. But the thing is that you want them, one, you have an issue.
Right.
You want them to be intrusive. You want them to be invasive, right?
Right.
But you trust them. You know that they're there to help. You know that they're going to come in, address the problem, not judge you. They are going to provide you support and care. So you don't, when they come and bust the door down, you don't look at it in a negative sense. If you are going through something and your demeanor changed, your best friend, your bestie, your favorite cousin, right?
Right.
They would say, hey, you're not yourself right now. There's something that's going on with you. The way you responded in that situation is not your normal self. Is everything okay? That's a meddlesome question.
Sure
That's pretty
is.
invasive.
But I trust them.
But you trust. It's built on trust. So when that friend, that bestie, when they ask the question, we don't look at it in a negative light. We know that that person cares about us. And we respond differently. What I'm saying is that we need leaders that have built a foundation of trust, that they can ask the same question and get the same response, because the person that they're asking that question to trusts them. They know that they want what's best for them.
Mm-hmm.
They know that they're asking the question because they care about them, and they don't look at it as being negatively intrusive or intruding. They look at it different. But there are going to be times, and the reason why I continue using the word is, as I said before, Simon Sinek wanted me to find a word that made people feel comfortable. Leadership is not always comfortable. Managers stay in their comfort zone.
Yeah.
You can manage resources, you can manage the spreadsheets, you can manage money, the task list. You can stay comfortable managing. But when you really want to lead, when you really want to get to know and engage people, oftentimes you are going to have to be in a situation where it might be a little bit uncomfortable. And so that is what I'm telling leaders to do. And I'm not going to try to find a comfortable word so I could tell them to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
That's right. You got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, period. Or you're not going to start a business. You're not going to get a new job. You're not going to do or help that person like we talked about early on in our conversation,
Right. And
to
guess
help
what?
save a life. It's not going to be comfortable.
You're not going to be really authentic
Right.
because there are times that I don't care how far you go up in the organization, how long you've been, there's sometimes you don't have the answer. There's sometimes that you're not at your best.
Oh, yes.
There are times
Believe me, Marcus, that is so true.
right. There are times that you are having a bad day.
Right.
We need leaders that in those moments are willing to be uncomfortable, willing to be humble, willing to be transparent and say, I'm not at my best today.
Yeah.
Or I know we need to go in this direction. I'm not exactly sure how we're going to get there, but this is the goal. And collectively, we are going to figure it out. Or we need people to say, hey, I had a mental health challenge early in my career and I got some help. And now my career is back on track. My life is back on track. I battled alcoholism. I had some marital problems. I had an issue with my kids as well. This is how I addressed it. I made a mistake on the job. This is how I got over it.
Yeah.
We need leaders to be okay having those conversations.
Yeah. Well, what are some characteristics of somebody who wants to build and to work on this leadership side? What are some characteristics that do you think? We've hit on a lot of them, I know.
Oh, yeah.
Anything I've missed?
Well, emotion. I mean, we talked about emotional intelligence,
Yep.
a little bit, right? Trust, like that is the foundation. You have to be a person that people trust in order to do this.
Yeah.
If people don't trust, they're not going to open up to you, right? It's just as simple as that, right? Transparent. And with that is being humble, vulnerable, but
Yes.
being completely transparent. I can't expect someone to tell me about their family if I'm unwilling to tell them about my family, right? And sometimes you being transparent about yourself is what builds the trust and opens up that dialogue where people feel like it's okay to talk about what's going on, right? Concerted effort. This is a leadership style that takes effort. It takes time to get to know people.
It does.
Effort to figure out how individuals like to be led. What are the different concerns, the career goals? You have to be willing to invest the time. So you have to be a leader that's willing to make that concerted effort. Active listening. I think there are times leaders get senior and they just think that they don't have to listen anymore. They're the only ones that need to speak. They know it all. Intrusive leaders are active listeners.
I need to work on that one, Marcus.
Yeah, well, trust me, we all can use some help with that. I'm pretty sure my wife will tell you that I can do a little better with
my
it.
husband. So okay, so go ahead. I didn't want to interrupt you. I wanted to be real.
Yeah, but no, I was actually reading a book I'm actually reading a book right now by John Maxwell.
Okay.
And I think the correct title is "Good Leaders Ask Great Questions."
Okay.
And in that, he took a quote from someone else, but the quote was basically someone feeling like they have been listened to is very close to the feeling of being loved. That is how important feeling heard is.
Wow. Okay.
It's almost like being loved. And think about it. How many times have you been somewhere where someone has not solved the problem, but they have simply listened to you?
Yeah.
You feel so much better.
Yeah.
Right? And so I often, you heard me say a little bit about the difference between managers and leaders. One of the things that I like to say is any leader can allow you to speak. They can give you the floor at the meeting. They can allow you to communicate your thought, your idea. Any manager can do that. A leader can make sure that you felt heard. And those are two different things. And sometimes managers know, hey, I need to allow people to speak. So, John, what do you have? Thanks, John. Susie, you got anything? Thank you, Susie. Appreciate it. Jane, you got something? Thank you, Jane. I allowed you to speak, but do you felt heard?
Yeah.
Did I really listen to what John, Tom, Susie, did I listen to them? Intrusive leaders truly listen. And I will tell you that there have been times that I have worked for people that they did not take my recommendation. I told them to go left and they went right. But they knew, I felt like they knew why I told them to go left. I felt heard. And when they explained to me, I understand why you want me to go left, but this is why we should go right. I said, well, I'm going to be right there with you because I felt heard.
Right.
I knew the position. Hey, you allowed me to speak, but you listened. You made the decision. We're going right. And I'm going to be right there next to you, doing everything that I can to make sure your idea and your direction works out.
Right.
Because you listened to me first.
I really appreciate the coaching session, by the way. Multiple people are going to benefit from this coaching session, but I'm actually enjoying and appreciation the leadership coaching session, the session that I'm getting this afternoon. So
yeah,
thanks.
well, hey, there's a coaching arm of the Canady Leadership Group.
So we're going to talk about that because I want to make sure we get a couple things before you've given me an hour of your time, and I could talk to you forever, and I know you don't have time for that. So I hope we can connect again. But I mean, leading for the next generation, this is the humans that I don't know if you have kids, but mine are 22 and 18, and there's no other way I don't think you can lead them than this way. They don't appreciate you not, hearing them like we just talked about. So this leadership style, this leadership, should we call it a style? I guess it's a style. It's a way of life. Yeah. It's is critical for future. And I will say, I mean, I've got this book right here, the Intrusive Leadership, How to Become That Leader, is really the leadership style of the future from my perspective. And I can't recommend the book enough as I'm marking it up. Yeah. Is there anything that you want to, this is a Proof Point podcast, I want to give you the floor to say any passing thoughts. Again, I don't want to take any more of your time because you've given me an hour of your time, and I'm blessed and honored, by the way, on that to leave our listeners with. Yes. Well, first of all, this doesn't have to be the only time. Really? Okay. I'm writing that down, Marcus. I will definitely come back if you feel like I can add value to a conversation. But you hit upon this leadership style for the future. I will tell you that oftentimes, matter of fact, I think when I did the research paper on intrusive leadership, I think the title of the research paper was The Most Critical Leadership Style for the Future. And the reason why is because this younger generation is going to force us to lead different. Yes. The way most of us were led and previous generations were led is simply not going to work for this younger generation. They want to bring their whole selves to work. I often talk about in the military, and we still have people that are in the workforce, in the military today, that came up at a time where the slogan was, hey, if the Army wanted you to have a wife, we would have issued you one.
if the Marines wanted you to have a child, we would have put one in your sea bag.
Right.
And the idea was that home was home. You keep your personal life. Don't bring that here. Like everything we need, we give you. Everything else, that's your own. That is simply not going to work for this younger generation. If an organization wants to be successful in retaining the amazing talent of this younger workforce, because they are truly talented.
They're talented, amazing, critical thinkers, gifted at all levels.
So far advanced than what we were.
Yes.
And this whole idea that there is that the younger generation does not have a propensity to serve is wrong.
Actually,
they might not have a propensity to serve under your leadership, but they have a propensity to serve this country. This younger generation loves this country just like any other generation.
Yeah.
But they are going to force people to lead different. If you want to win in this globally strategic environment, you are going to have to lead different. And it is my message, the way that I feel, you have to be an intrusive leader. You have to make sure that intrusive leadership is part of your organizational fiber. And if you do not, the younger generation is going to quietly quit and find places where they can feel valued in their authentic self, where they can show up to work in an emotionally safe environment. So without a doubt, I would just love to leave with your audience that if you want to be a leader in the future that has influence, a leader that is able to retain people, a leader that is truly able to have impact, if you want to become that leader that people remember and they talk about 15, 20 years down the road, you have to be an intrusive leader. And if you're interested in learning more, there is one textbook on the leadership style, and it is the one that I wrote that you mentioned earlier. I just so happen to have a copy myself.
Got one too, right here.
Intrusive Leadership, How to Become That Leader. This is the only book on this leadership style. If you want to learn about servant leadership, there's plenty of books. If you want to learn about authentic leadership, charismatic leadership, there are so many books on those leadership styles. And I advocate that you read and you research different leadership styles.
Yeah, you're reading the one, right? You just mentioned one that you're reading right now too.
Exactly.
I wrote it down. I'm going to go get it too.
Yeah, become a student of leadership. But I, without a doubt, will tell you that you have to add this one to your leadership library as well. Yeah. And if you make intrusive leadership the foundation of your leadership style, it will actually enhance your ability to use other leadership styles when those times come. Because one leadership style in one situation is not going to be the correct leadership style in another situation.
Right.
But regardless of the situation, if people trust you and they really know that you feel that you want what's best for them, the other leadership styles that's necessary for that situation, you're going to simply do it better.
No, that's perfect. A perfect ending to our discussion today. And Marcus, thank you so much for coming. We've been talking to Marcus Canady with Canady Leadership Group, a change agent, a hero from my perspective, and thank you for serving. We can't say that enough. So thank you for being on the Proof Point podcast, and go get Intrusive Leadership. It's on Amazon. You can also go to Canady Leadership Group website and learn more. And thank you so much again, Marcus, for being on our podcast today.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And as you mentioned, yes, you can go to the website, canadyleadershipgroup.com. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. Just search Canady Leadership Group and come join me on this journey as we move forward, trying to make better leaders across the world.
Yeah, I'll make sure we put that in the show notes too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Proof Point Podcast. We'll see you again next time. And be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.